everyone, welcome back to another episode of Spectator Sports. Do me a favor and hit the subscribe button and hit a like on this video to get all your content. We have just opened up a Instagram page and I'm going to be dropping that link in the description. And we're going to be also making some TikToks too moving forward. So Spectator Sports has been slowly expanding this summer, and in preparation for the NFL season especially, there's going to be a lot more shorter content on there. So please follow and continue to grow the page. To kick off this episode, I wanted to preview fantasy football for this upcoming season. I wanted to break it down position by position, and to start with the running backs, you definitely have to draft Jonathan Taylor. He's coming off a near MVP campaign, led the league in scrimmage yards, didn't really show signs of slowing down, and has a brilliant offensive line to block from as well. And with Matt Ryan at quarterback, he's definitely going to be featured more in the passing game, but he's definitely the bell cow back for the Indianapolis Colts. The second running back I'd say would be Austin Eckler of the Los Angeles Chargers. He's definitely the perfect dual threat running back, can do a little bit of everything in terms of catching and running between the tackles. And he has a nose for the end zone as well, and that's where the big points are in fantasy football. In third, I was going to say Derrick Henry. He was coming off a major injury with that Jones fracture last season, but before that, he was on an absolute tear. I mean, he had 900 rushing yards in about 8 games. That's averaging well over 100 yards a game. And with the potential to play 17 games, as long as he's healthy, Derrick Henry is definitely a top 3 fantasy option in terms of running backs. At 4, I'm going to have CMC Christian McCaffrey, who is coming off a couple of injury-riddled seasons. It's been clearly a long time since he had his historic 2019 campaign where he had 1,000 yards receiving and 1,000 yards rushing. However, they've improved the offensive line, drafting Ike Ekwonu in the first round, and whoever wins the quarterback battle between Sam Darnold or Baker Mayfield, there's still definitely adequate quarterbacks to get him the ball in terms of dump off passes and set up screens to follow those blocks and hopefully get into the end zone. At 5, I'm going to have Nick Chubb from Cleveland. I think he's a phenomenal running back. He has a nose for the end zone, really strong between the tackles, and he's always top 5, top 7 in terms of rushing yards. It was kind of weird that I saw in my research that some other online forums had him on the bottom of the top 10 or even outside the top 10. Now, I know injuries maybe is a question mark. He had some bouts with COVID and some injuries as well. And he's going to be sharing that backfield also with Kareem Hunt. But when given opportunities, Nick Chubb really makes the most of them, and I would still say that he's definitely worth drafting. I would say definitely draft him in the late first round or the early second round, depending on your draft position, of course. Out of the next options, I would say Dalvin Cook out of Minnesota. I think he's a really solid back. And then kind of like CMC, can do a little bit of everything. The question is, again, if he's going to be healthy. He was dinged up a little bit last season, but still finished pretty strongly. Not elite fantasy running back output, but still very consistent. It's really going to be coming down to, can he get as many yards as he can. He's guaranteed, I'd say, to average a touchdown or so a game, so he's going to give you 12 points or so depending on your league format, but he definitely needs to be a consistent 20-point scorer to really give you a chance in fantasy football. Up next, I would have Joe Mixon out of Cincinnati. The Cincinnati offense is as truly high-powered as it can possibly get. Mostly known for its aerial attack with Joe Burrow connecting with one of 3 wide receivers, but Joe Mixon is still a very talented running back and definitely is a great way to control the pace of the game in terms of using the ground game instead of always relying on the passing game for the Cincinnati Bengals. And lastly, definitely a running back that you should definitely get within the first 2 rounds if available is DeAndre Swift. Detroit's offensive options have been limited as of the past, and DeAndre Swift has been dealing with injuries himself, but another year under the same type of coaching format as well, I think would be really helpful. And there's going to be openings for him as well now with Amara St. Brown developing into a pretty decent wide receiver. And then with them drafting Jamison Williams out of Alabama, who will be coming probably a little bit later in the season, maybe starting the season on the PUP list. Jared Goff really relies on talented running backs that can utilize the screen game. He's not really a deep ball thrower, so he's going to be using the short passing game. So look for DeAndre Swift to cash in on some receptions as well. And some honorable mentions, depending on your draft position and how the draft unfolds for your league. I would say definitely go after Aaron Jones out of Green Bay. Saquon Barkley, who has been, of course, injury prone as of late, but when healthy, which is a big if, I think he's a huge home run threat. And also guys like Alvin Kamara, who's taken a step back, but I still think Alvin Kamara is a very effective running back in fantasy, and I think he'll be great for addition to your team. And I think a big sleeper, and I'm going to get into some mid to late round gems, but I really think Travis Etienne out of Jacksonville is going to be a good bet to take if he's available somewhere in that third, fourth, fifth round range. He's unfortunately missed his rookie season with a torn ACL, but if you watched his Clemson days, him and Trevor Lawrence were kind of on the same page quite a bit. He has a really good sense for catching the ball out of the backfield, and he's a pretty good runner between the tackles, good goal line threat as well. With James Robinson there as well, of course he's coming off a major injury. I would expect that Travis Etienne would be getting a bulk of the carries to start the season, and maybe it would be hard for him to relinquish that starting running back gig in Jacksonville. Now moving on to the wide receivers, I think it's pretty obvious to say that Cooper Kupp would be the undisputed number one option in terms of fantasy rankings. Coming in after that, I would go with Jamar Chase. He was just so phenomenal in his rookie season. I think he's just only going to get better from here. Third, I'm going to go with Devontae Adams. I think him being now still the epicenter of the wide receiving corps in Vegas. He has that connection with Derek Carr. That chemistry has been there since their college days. And I think they have a general trust in each other. Now, they haven't played together in the pros, but he's just going to be targeted so highly. And he just has such a good ability to get open in terms of knowing where the holes in the zone are. Obviously, I would say one of the best route runners in the NFL, definitely. After that, another talented receiver, Justin Jefferson. I think pretty standard. His resume speaks for itself. He's a touchdown machine, guaranteed 1,300 yards probably. I think he would be a gem of a receiver to draft in the first round. After that, I would say Stephon Diggs. He's didn't have as great of a season as he did back in 2020 than he did in 2021. But I think he's going to definitely still ascend and be up there in amongst the top 5 fantasy wide receiver rankings. After that, I would go with Deebo Samuel just because he's just such a dual threat. He can either run the ball or catch the ball. It doesn't really matter. He just will definitely get about 10 to 12 touches a game. And whatever the case may be, he's definitely guaranteed 15, 17 points a game from fantasy. After that, I would go with CeeDee Lamb out of Dallas. I think he's going to be the focal point of the offense, especially early on with their injuries to their receiving corps. They just lost James Washington, and they're already coming into the season without Michael Gallup as well. So I would say CeeDee Lamb would be a great option to take in that third round range as long as he's available. DJ Moore out of Carolina, I think I've been a big fan of his. He's definitely going to be the focal point for the Carolina offense as well. And I think him and Robbie Anderson in combo would be really good duo, and both of them would contribute to each other's success in Carolina. Another option to take would be A.J. Brown from the Philadelphia Eagles, newly acquired receiver in this offseason, part of a very talented 2019 wide receiver class. Him and Jalen Hurts have a brotherly friendship, and they've had some chemistry working in the off seasons for the past few years. And I think only in this off season, their chemistry is only going to grow now with training camp and with Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert as well. That might eat into AJ Brown's target numbers, but I think still he's just going to be such a monster and definitely going to give you really good output. I would say probably 1,150 yards, 7 to 8 touchdowns, and really consistent play. So definitely draft him if you can get your hands on him. And a very reliable option, a very safe bet, I would say, is Keenan Allen. His play has kind of dipped due to the emergence of Mike Williams last year. Him and Justin Herbert seem to be on the page, especially on the deeper balls. But consistently, Keenan Allen's just going to be there, working the slot, working those out routes, those dig routes, and he's just going to be there, and has a nose for the end zone as well, and really consistent in terms of getting 70-80 yards. He's a PPR machine, so definitely go after Keenan Allen if you can. And some honorable mentions, the wide receiver class is just so talented, but definitely go after Cortland Sutton if you can, Terry McLaurin out of Washington, DK Metcalf. The only reason why I didn't have him maybe in the top 10 is just because of the quarterback situation in Seattle. He's a talented receiver, but a receiver is only as effective as the quarterback that's behind center. And I would definitely take a flyer on Amara St. Brown out of Detroit. I think he's going to be picking up where he left off. He was a late bloomer last year, and he's just going to continue to be pretty good. For the tight ends, it's pretty obvious to say that Travis Kelce, especially with the departure of Tyreek Hill to Miami, is just going to continue to eat up the targets for Kansas City. He's, I think it's pretty clear to say he's the best tight end in the game. This is so fast, so hard to guard, and he's just going to get a lot of touchdowns, especially in the red zone area. At number 2, I would say Mark Andrews out of Baltimore. Some people maybe say Greg Kittle, but his play has kind of dropped off. He's been injured, and the quarterback situation is questionable in San Francisco. Mark Andrews has performed consistently in this league since entering it, and been a reliable target for Lamar Jackson, but also despite his absence in the tail end of last season, his plays continued to be stellar, and he's a reliable option for the Baltimore passing attack. At 3, I would go with Kyle Pitts. The Falcons really don't have a lot of receiving options. I mean, their receiving corps is honestly decimated at this point, and he would be the clear focal point in terms of the passing and attack between Marcus Mariota or Desmond Ridder, whoever would be the starting quarterback. And he's just so talented. I mean, he's fast, he's strong. Had a slow start to start, but after that game in London where he went over 100 yards for the first time, just been consistent. Earned a Pro Bowl nod too in his rookie season, which is pretty phenomenal to start off your career. So I would say number 3, just because of the lack of options that Atlanta has. Definitely go with Kyle Pitts when you can take him. At 4, this is where I would put in Greg Kittle. Still very talented tight end in this era of tight ends that's really been picking up since the emergence of guys like Gronk. Tight ends are really important in fantasy football now, and Greg Kittle is definitely an intricate part of your team if you can get him. At 5, I was going to put down Dallas Goedert. I think he's going to break out this season and be a fringe 1,000-yard receiver. Him and that chemistry with Jalen Hurts has been great. I just watched their opening drive of their preseason game, and Goddard caught a touchdown in that red zone area, kind of taking a hit and then diving over a receiver into the end zone. He's been a consistent threat, very reliable red zone option. I would definitely see him getting about 6-7 receiving touchdowns for sure. Following that, I would say Darren Waller, very talented tight end out of Las Vegas. He's been probably one of the best receiving threats that the Raiders have had. But he was missing a few games last year, and that's where my concerns are. And then his targets are going to probably be decreased with the emergence of Hunter Renfrow last year, and then with the addition of Devontae. It's just uncomparable to really say that his target count wouldn't decrease just because you have arguably the best wide receiver in the league on your team. Following that, TJ Hawkinson, he missed some time last year as well, but he's a Pro Bowler in 2020. Pretty consistent option for Jared Goff in a very limited Detroit Lion offense. And then after that, I go with Dawson Knox out of Buffalo. Pretty consistent option for Josh Allen. Only makes sense to take him, especially with that passing attack growing exponentially. To preview the quarterbacks, I would say Josh Allen would be your best bet. You really want to hold off on your quarterback selection until as late as possible. It always depends who's going to really reach for that quarterback. Of course, somebody's going to reach maybe in round 3 or 4, and then those elite guys are gone, but you can always find a pretty good quarterback option. It's a very deep and talented league in terms of quarterbacks. But to go back to rankings, I would say Josh Allen would be the best option just because he's a dual threat quarterback. Very talented arm. It's going to probably put up about 30 plus touchdown passes, I would say, maybe 40 total touchdowns. Going to be really, really smart with the football. So definitely draft Josh Allen when you have the chance. After that, I would go with Kyler Murray. Again, you got to cash in on these dual threat quarterbacks. He's primed for another really good season. Lamar, he tailed off unfortunately with that ankle sprain last year, but he's definitely a top 3 candidate in terms of drafting a quarterback. Just his legs alone is just so dangerous, and with that extra game, that's something you have to really figure out. Is that 17th game is another opportunity for a player to play and thus bulk up your points. Next up, I would say Jalen Hurts, just because he just has so many weapons and he's going to be primed to take that huge leap from year 2 to year 3. Definitely developed much better as a passer, being more accurate, and he had a perfect start to the preseason, going 6 for 6, perfect passer rating, finishing with a touchdown to Dallas Goedert. And I think just because all the weapons he has, from A.J. Brown or Miles Sanders out of the backfield, Devontae Smith, former Heisman, Dallas Goedert, the list goes on, and I think all these options, there's only so many people you can guard or have your eyeballs tuned into. There's going to be somebody running open, so I would say he's going to at least put up about 3,500 passing yards, about 700 rushing yards, and definitely capable of putting up like 40 total touchdowns, but let's go with 35 just to be safe. After that, I would say Patrick Mahomes. Even though he's lost Tyreek Hill, they've kind of replaced his production with a few other members, with Juju Smith-Schuster, Sky Moore. They still have Travis Kelce, who's a very reliable option, and then they also picked up MVS from formerly playing for the Green Bay Packers. So they definitely got some return on that deal. So I don't think Patrick Mahomes is going to drop up too much in terms of fantasy production. Justin Herbert, just a super consistent quarterback, going to give you 35 touchdown passes, 4,000 passing yards, very few interceptions. He's just so dangerous, and the Chargers are going to go for it this season and really try to push the Chiefs this season. To tail out the rest of the list, I would go with Joe Burrow. His receiving corpse alone is just so ridiculous. He's just going to be primed for another productive season. Tom Brady would be a really consistent option. Despite age, he's definitely holding his own and going into his age 45 season. Some mid-round gems that I think is something to really pick up on. Some I've mentioned, some I haven't. Jalen Waddle, I think he's just going to be getting a lot of red zone touches on those drag routes, and going to cash in on that. I mentioned Terry McLaurin, very good receiver for Washington. Deontay Johnson, another good option as well. Cam Akers for the Los Angeles Rams, now coming in with a full season under his belt. He's going to be definitely pretty healthy and a really good, reliable option for the Rams. Allen Robinson, his new teammate. Cooper Kupp is going to take up a lot of attention wherever he lines up. So Allen Robinson's going to really have a lot of one-on-one matchup, and I think he's going to be excellent in the red zone area. Gabriel Davis from the Buffalo Bills, in that divisional playoff game alone, he put up 200 plus receiving yards. Now, is he going to do that every game? No, of course not. But with the attention that Stephon Diggs gives, he's going to be a really, really valuable wide receiver too. Another option for running backs, Elijah Mitchell. Now we know that San Francisco does running back by committee, but Elijah Mitchell was probably the most productive out of that running back by committee. So I'd say now with Raheem Mostert leaving the team, I would go with Elijah Mitchell if you have an opportunity to draft him. Antonio Gibson, really consistent running back. He's definitely has a nose for the end zone, can catch it too, so really productive player. Kareem Hunt, despite Nick Chubb being slotted ahead of him on the depth chart, he's a great running back too. And Sky Moore, he's just so new, but he's, according to reports, he's been killing it in his training camp, and I think in this preseason we may get a sneak peek of what he can do. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I've always been a fan of him too. Now his production has dropped off since his rookie year, but definitely a very dangerous receiver and running back. And lastly, Brandon Ayuk, I've always been a fan of him as well. There's just so many options in this offense for the San Francisco 49ers, but I think he's going to be a really solid threat and be pretty valuable for your team. And for some late round gems, I'm really big on Kenny Gainwell from the Philadelphia Eagles. I was taking some running back one reps away from guys like Miles Sanders. You know, Miles on paper is a very talented running back, but injuries, and last year he didn't even score a touchdown. Kind of a dud season for him fantasy-wise. So I would say Kenny Gainwell, who actually led the Eagles in rushing touchdowns last season for running backs at least, would be a really good option for you to take. Quarterbacks, like I said, you can definitely get them in the later rounds. Derek Carr, Aaron Rodgers, Kirk Cousins. They put up great stats. So I think they'd be really productive for your team for QB2 or QB1, wherever the case may be. Even Matthew Stafford, I mean, the weapons he has is ridiculous, so it would be really productive for you to get him. And now with the NFL preseason underway, there's been a lot of storylines that I haven't covered since last episode. To begin, there was a contract extension for Kyler Murray that raised some questions for sure. He was granted a 5-year contract extension worth $230.5 million, and the real head scratcher was these leaked reports about the 4 hours of independent study clause, and he would possibly have some of his money revoked or not been paid the full amount if he doesn't complete that study time, which is a kind of a concerning thing. It's definitely a really, really crazy media circus that the Cardinals have found themselves in. I don't know who leaked this, but it doesn't look good for either side, especially Kyler Murray. But then I think the Cardinals look even worse because you paid this guy who you don't trust to study $230 million for 5 years, and you're basically putting all your eggs in his basket. And I mean, Kyler's been solid. I mean, he's been doing the most of what he can, but with 2 seasons with guys like DeAndre Hopkins now, they only have 1 playoff berth to show for it. They've started off strong, but they tail off in the later stages of the season, only to get completely blown out by the Los Angeles Rams last year in the wild card round, which was disappointing to say the least. But I would say they'd be a threat to make the postseason again. It's definitely a really concerning sign to see that maybe Kyler doesn't really study as much. I've heard from other quarterbacks that they have been really in the room studying nonstop. I think it's just really concerning to hear that your franchise quarterback needs that clause implanted in the contract itself. It shows signs that he's not really focused on the league or his team, what the task at hand is. So we'll wait and see what that really does, if it's a distraction. Now, they did take that clause out, but the fact that it was there to begin with, it was such a red flag per se. And we'll see what Kyler can do with the Cardinals this upcoming season. Now, to piggyback off the contract extension with Kyler Murray, we go back to Lamar Jackson, who has taken this whole offseason to represent himself and really try to get the most dollars he can with this contract extension. The Ravens have kind of stand pat. They haven't really paid him, and they're looking to see maybe to let this go as long as possible before they actually pay the guy. The longer they wait, in my opinion, the worse it gets for the Ravens, because he can just keep on commanding more dollars, which he should be. On paper, Lamar has accomplished way much more than Kyler Murray has, so automatically that number has to be 5 years, $230 million at least. He's now, of course, the question marks are always, is he accurate? Can he win in the postseason? Is his style of play really sustainable in the NFL? And I think it is. I mean, that injury that he suffered last season was just, a fluky thing. Ankle injuries happened. That was a decimated Ravens team. He's not going to be under that much. I think the receiving corps is still very questionable, but they do have their running backs back with guys like J.K. Dobbins especially. And that offensive line has been really consistent, and the Ravens have made some great additions on the defensive end, so I think they're going to really cash in on short fields with potentially the turnovers that this defense can create for them. So Lamar is definitely still the winner in this, even though he doesn't have that contract extension yet. I would say that his values is going to keep on going up, and the Ravens better find a way to pay him and extend him, get this contract done, get it over with, and let this distraction go to bed. Now, the ongoing saga with the Cleveland quarterback, we don't, here on Spectator Sports, we don't mention this guy's name anymore. We did to introduce the topic and to raise awareness. Me personally, I will never again mention his name on this. I'm not going to give him his flowers at all. I think, what he's done is an atrocity to women, and I think those women, despite them getting some kind of settlement money, have suffered immensely, and no amount of money can really do enough to undo those wrongs that this guy has done. And the league has come down on him. They decided to suspend him for 6 games. Now, that arbitrator is now confirmed that, and he's going to be serving 6 games. But however, the league now wants to extend that to potentially the full year. Something I was a big advocate for myself. Bare minimum, at least the majority of the season has to be more than 6 games. The amount of players receiving longer suspensions, or as many games in terms of suspensions for PEDs, I think DeAndre Hopkins, actually, he's suspended for 6 games for a banned substance. So you're going to say that somebody taking a supplement that's just on a banned list of substances that you can't take is the same punishment as somebody whose name will remain unspoken is doing these terrible things. He just came out today actually with an apology, and he's admitting to the wrongdoing. So there is some acknowledgement of guilt there, whether it's late or never. He's acknowledged it. So I don't know what this means, but I really hope that now I know the NFLPA is going to do the best, represent the best interests of all players, but that's just their job. But I really hope that the NFL can find a way to get this guy suspended for the season entirely, if not a majority of it. The Browns themselves, I've lost respect for it as well, just because the way they made his contract was that he still gets a majority of his money. It's just bonus money, so it doesn't count against the cap. He still gets his max dollars, and he still gets to walk around freely, kind of doing his regular thing, despite not playing for the better part of a year. So that's the update on that situation. We'll probably revisit that with any more developments. Their minimum is that the Browns will be going in with Jacoby Brissett to start off the season, and Maybe they might trade for Jimmy G. We don't know. But at least to start off, they're going to be missing QB1 for 6 games. Now, transitioning to some Premier League soccer, where it's back, and we had opening weekend last week, and it was a really fun weekend. Now, transitioning to Premier League, which is back, and it had a great opening weekend, I must say. Defending champions Manchester City started off with a 2-0 win, and that featured a brace from their newest superstar signing, Erling Haaland, and he was as great of a debut as you can possibly have. I mean, took a penalty kick, smashed it through the net, and followed up with another goal. I think they're just going to be really dangerous. Guys like De Bruyne, just really orchestrating the whole offense. I mean, he had this excellent through ball that split the defense, stretched them wide open, and all Haaland had to do was just be one-on-one with the goalkeeper, and, you know, it's curtains after that. Liverpool actually was down 0-1, then 2-1 with about 10 minutes to go. Mohamed Salah saved them to salvage a point against newly promoted Fulham, and that's definitely a rocky start to start off the season, and now they're already looking down 2 points to City, their arch nemesis as of late, and I think that's a little bit of concerning, but you know, there's plenty of fixtures to go along in the Premier League. Now, to transition to acknowledging a few big events too that happened in sports. Serena Williams, arguably the best tennis player of all time, I would say the best women's player of all time for sure, has announced her retirement, and it's a sad day for sure, but it's also kind of a happy day as well as we reflect on her beautiful career. I mean, unless she wins the US Open, she will finish second all-time in women's Grand Slams with 23, career Grand Slam multiple times, and I think it'll be great to send off for her to leave tennis on home soil for sure. She's been really instrumental to the game, and really brought awareness, especially for women of color. And I'm really excited to see what she does post her tennis career. Another thing is that, you know, she's just won so much, so consistently, but also won a major with a baby in her. She was 8 weeks pregnant by the time she won her last major. She's made finals since the birth of her daughter, but hasn't been able to finish the deal, but still very remarkable that in that post-pregnancy stretch she's remained consistent, getting back to finals and being consistently involved in later stages of the Grand Slam tournaments. And an acknowledgement of a major great, the NBA has suffered a major loss with the death of Bill Russell, a truly monumental player, part of a very generational set of African American players who kind of changed the game and changed civil rights too from a sports standpoint. I mean, he teamed up with guys like Muhammad Ali, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Jim Brown, to name a few, and what he did for the city of Boston. He's an icon. During my recent visit to Boston, I mean, I heard his name recalled several times. I mean, he's class personified, a hard worker, perfect teammate, and what he's done after the game. I mean, they have the finals MVP named after him, and then all he did during his time was win. He's the definition of a winner, the greatest champion in team sports for sure. And the league's gonna miss him, and I'm thankful that what they did to commemorate his honor and his memory is retire his number 6. And that's it for this episode of Spectator Sports. Thank you so much for listening. As soon as the NFL season starts to kick off, we're gonna be having some reels and TikToks come up, and so give those pages a follow, and I hope to see you there. Take care.